So we are on. Okay. So normally we are two hosts, but my co-host, Professor DeLauro, is celebrating the French Independence Day
Oh,
today.
yes,
So,
yes.
so I'm flying solo today with you. So for those who are just coming in, I'm just repeating. So Professor Risse would like to have the questions in the chat today. So in a departure from past presentations, so we're using chat today for questions. So I'll give it like 2 more minutes and then let's start.
Okay.
Usually we are around 37 or so, 35, 37. We are now at 22 right now.
Okay. Is it hot down there in DC? It's pretty hot in Boston, so.
Yeah, it is. It is. Definitely. This morning it was relatively cool. It was just like 64, 66 degrees. It was actually pleasant. But
Oh, that's not bad.
yeah, but today will be a big heat dome, you said. So I don't know. What does my phone say how hot it is? 86 right now. So
Okay. I think we're about 94 here.
okay, yeah. It's to reach 101 today, all week this week. Okay, in
Oh,
Virginia.
wow.
Okay, good. So others might, still trickle in over time. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Marielle Risse, her areas from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Marielle Risse's areas of interest are intercultural communication, education, effective research, and teacher training. She taught graduate and undergraduate classes in the Middle East for 21 years, focusing on pedagogy, cultural studies, world literature, and comparative literature. Her book, Researching and Working on the Arabian Peninsula, Creating Effective Interactions, out by Palgrave Macmillan 2025, explains how to effectively navigate the Arabian Peninsula as a non-local business professional, government employee, anthropologist, researcher, or teacher. She also published ethnographic reflections on marriage in Dhofar, Oman, Anthem 26. Houseways is in southern Oman, Routledge 2023. Foodways in southern Oman, Routledge 2021. And Community and Autonomy in southern Oman, Palgrave Macmillan 2019. So with no further ado, I open the floor for you, Professor Risse. Take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Um, I am, oops, hold on a second. So, um, in the learning outcomes for this course, these are some of the learning outcomes that are mentioned. And I just wanted to make it clear that today I'm going to be focusing on cultural, ritual, ethical, environmental, and geographical issues related to food. So the plan is that I'm going to do a short orientation to Oman, which was my area of focus, with a map, some photos of houses, and a discussion of regular meals. And then I'm just going to have a break for quick questions, which you could type into the chat. As I said before, I don't think many participants in this meeting have had a lot of experience with the country of Oman. And so the quick questions is just if something comes up that confuses you or how does that work, you could just type it into the chat and we can stop for a couple minutes and discuss. Then I'm going to talk about the rituals, the feasts, the fasts, and again, a little more time for quick questions. Then I'm going to go through some photographs of meals, and then we can have a general discussion. I'll get rid of the PowerPoint presentation, and we can just chat as normal with raising your hand towards the end. So that's an overview of what we're doing. So to begin with, Oman, unfortunately, is in the news a lot right now, and here's a map to orient you to that. So I was in the southern part, so all the way down at the bottom of the map, the city is called Salalah, and it's right there by the blue anchor at the bottom. And Salalah is the main city that's on the coast. It's about an hour and a half drive from the border with Yemen. And the region is called Dhofar. So like the name of the state is Dhofar. The city is Salalah and the country is Oman. So as I said, the coast right there is the Indian Ocean. And for most of it, the mountains come directly down to the sea. So it looks like this. But you also have the far side of the mountains. So the mountains usually look like they do on the right-hand side, but the Dhofar region is the only place on the Arabian Peninsula that has a monsoon season, which is actually right now, where you have 3 months of drizzle and rain. So the mountains look like they do there on the left-hand photo. So this is a normal, everyday, average house in Salalah. And often when Americans look at it, they think, oh, that's rich people. Oh, look at that huge house for those rich people. But that is a house for actually about 30 people, if not more. So I'm just going to take a moment and do a little orientation. For myself, I lived for 19 years in Salalah, and I moved back to America 2 years ago. I taught literature and cultural studies there, and for the purpose of this class, the interesting thing about me is that I wrote an entire book about food in the Dhofar region called Foodways in Southern Oman. For the purpose of this discussion, the most important things to understand about Oman is that it's a very middle-class society. It does not have the poverty and the war and the terrors of Yemen, and it does not have the great wealth of Saudi or Qatar or Bahrain or the Emirates. It is solidly middle class. And so there is no food insecurity. There's no homelessness. People are connected to their families. There's a lot of government support for people, but not great wealth. And so a house like this, for example, would have the father and mother, so the husband and wife, and then all of the married sons with their wives and children, and then all the unmarried children, and then an elderly aunt, maybe a nephew is living in the house for 2 months because he has a training course nearby, maybe a niece is living with them for some reason. So you have multi-generational, very large houses, which usually have one large kitchen where the main meals are cooked. And the individual inhabitants will have a suite that will often have a sitting room, a bedroom, and a bathroom. But when you see a house like this could be owned by a taxi driver. One son is a taxi driver, one daughter is a teacher, one son works for the electric company. I mean, that's the kind of people who would have this sort of house. The other thing I want to mention about Dhofar in general is it's one of the very last places on the Arabian Peninsula where you have these interlocking food networks. So because you have the monsoon season, you have the ability to herd animals so that you don't have to buy animal food 12 months a year. And if you have a good strong harif and a lot of rain, you can go 6 months without buying food. And so, for example, somebody who lives in a house like this might own several camel which are put together, sort of aggregated into herds, and there'll be a camel herder to sort of take them out. Or perhaps there's a woman in this house who owns a herd of goats, and she may either pay a herder or she may go out with the goats herself. Or there could be people in this house who own cows. And so you can have somebody who doesn't have a paying government sort of job, but who, for example, goes fishing and gives the fish to everybody in this house, to neighbors and to friends. And so they're not contributing cash to this household, but they are a very important part of the food network. And so you could have people, for example, who cook something and then give it to neighbors and friends. Or you could have either a man or a woman who has a small garden plot and grow fruit and vegetables. So there's a lot of circulation of food that does not involve money. So this is me, and this is how I did most of my research, sitting around talking to people. These are two other examples of houses, and I'm putting them in there so that when I talk about these communal meals, you sort of have a sense of where these people are. And almost everybody sort of builds their own house the way they want to, so there's a lot of variety of what the houses look like. So these were actually taken from my apartment window, and just to show you, I lived on the north side of the city of Salalah, facing the mountains. So that group of camels there on the left were just hanging out, right? They don't have a herder with them. Camels are all branded and can usually make their own way home at night. Now, on the other side, you have goats with a herder, and you can see how the animals are just sort of walking around wherever there is grass. And of course, there's a strong fishing component. So the large boat is called a dhow, and they go out for several weeks at a time. And then the small fishing boats are used daily by the men, and they can go out for 5 or 6 hours. So here is a typical living room. So Arabic houses usually have 2 living rooms. One's called a majlis that has a door to the outside. And you have the furniture all around the sides of the room and nothing in the middle. And so when you eat, you put down a layer of plastic sheeting sort of on the floor, and then everybody sits in a circle and eats sitting on the floor in one of these kind of rooms. Now, again, there's a lot of variety of what these rooms look like. So here are 2 other examples of these rooms. You can see they different colors, different decorations. The seating is around the outside, and then the middle has, you know, like these coffee tables on the left. They can be moved so that people can sit on the floor. And you can see on the right, there's no chairs. Like, people are literally sitting on the floor with these cushions. So because few people have a connection to Oman, I just wanted to do what I call a reorientation. And so when you talk about culture, you're often talking about 4 things: product, practice, place, and belief. So product, practice, and place are like the top part of an iceberg in that you can see them. And belief is the underlying structure underneath. So the big part of the iceberg that is underneath the water, which is why people are doing stuff. And those things change radically from what is common in the States to what is common in other places. So one product, water, okay, very basic. So in the States, it's very common that everybody carries around their own water bottles. And when I moved back to the States, I was just like, what are you people doing? What is this with the water bottles? Because in Oman, heat, humidity, and the fact that you do not drink water out of the fountains, or you don't drink water from the sink, for example, you drink from a sealed bottle. So people carry sealed bottles with them. You know, you buy a bottle of water and you drink it. You don't carry a water bottle, which also presupposes all these other issues, such as a place to clean it, ways to clean it, the ability to buy soap so that you can clean your water bottle. So there are all these things in place, often in the States, for people to carry around water bottles, like you can get water from a sink. The other issue in Oman is that water has a religious function. In Islam, there are 5 daily prayers. Before you can pray, you need to be in a state of ritual cleanliness. Now you can stay in that state from one prayer to another if you do and do not do certain things, but you need water to clean yourself. So hands, face, feet in a certain way. So that, for example, if you're going camping, you need to make sure that you have water to drink and water for prayers. Now, in Islam, if you don't have the water, you can use clean sand and, there's other things. But like the conception of water is very different in Oman. Another idea, food waste. So often in the States, you compost it, you throw it away, you pour water down the drain. Whereas in Oman, food waste goes back to the earth. So even if you're living in a house, if you have, for example, a pot of water from washing up dishes, you will often walk to the kitchen door and pour it into the earth outside of the house. Or if you have leftover food, you will put it on top of the house walls for the birds to take, or you'll put it next to the trash can for animals to eat. McDonald's. In America, that's everybody, right? In Oman, McDonald's is conceived as a place for children. It's for kids. So no Omani adult I know has ever eaten at a McDonald's. They just do not consider it food. And if your child wants McDonald's, then you take them to McDonald's and you buy them whatever. But as a child grows up, as it becomes wise and adult, it eats rice and meat and leaves McDonald's behind. So this is just some examples of how things are reconceived. So belief in rituals, like I live in Boston, and in Boston, Dunkin' Donuts is a ritual for everybody. Everybody drinks Dunkin'. But in Oman, in Dhofar, the people I worked with were Sunni Muslim. And a ritual, something that you do repeatedly, is always going to be in some way tied to religion. You are doing something because it's a good practice to do. Feasts. In America, Thanksgiving, very normal for people to say, oh my God, I ate so much. Oh, my stomach hurts. Oh, it was so good, I ate too much. Whereas in Oman, that makes no sense. Not at all. And, I'm not saying everybody eats perfectly and there's no people stuffing themselves, but to say out loud, I ate so much that my stomach hurts, is like saying, I'm a complete idiot. I am so stupid. Because it just doesn't make sense in Oman that you would do that. You eat the food you need and then you stop eating. And fasting. This was very amusing when I got there because I'm Methodist. And so when I would try to talk about, oh, you fast this way with my students, and they just laughed because in America, you could be like, oh, I'm on the cabbage fast. I only eat cabbage for 3 days. Or I'm fasting today, but of course, I'm going to drink water because I don't want a headache. Or Lent, giving something up for Lent, or not eating something one day, like not eating meat one day a week. In Oman, none of that is considered fasting. They consider that plain. Fasting has a very specific meaning in Oman, which is no food or drink or any kind of negative behavior from sunup until sundown. So what happens then is that if the product means something different and the belief is different, then you can end up in a very different place. So for example, in Oman, in the States, people often carry water bottles. And then you fast, different meanings. And the result is that you are expected often in the States to carry enough water and food for yourself. And if you're with other people, you should be generous and share. And it is a bad thing to be thirsty. It is a bad thing to be hungry. And if somebody in your group is about to be hangry, you need to stop them. And that does not happen in Oman at all. Because first of all, people are used to doing this very specific, very long fast. And sometimes it's 12 hours if Ramadan happens to be in the summer. and it's over 100 degrees and it's over 60% humidity, and you fasted for the entire day. So the fact that somebody says, I'm hungry or I'm thirsty, it does not create in anybody else a need to take care of you. If you are over the beginning of puberty, so if you are 12, 13, 14 years old, you do not say, or as a complaint, I'm hungry or thirsty. You deal with it, or you just be quiet. And if you're camping with people and for whatever reason you haven't started dinner yet and it's midnight, you don't complain. When dinner shows up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you do not complain, because of these different understandings of what it means to fast and what it means to control yourself. So that's just kind of an overview of how food can be conceived of in different ways. Two other points I want to make. One is some of you may know the word halal. So halal means permissible in Islam. It is not specifically tied to food, although in the States it is often used with food. So this was a little Valentine, sorry, that came out of New York, which I really like. So in Islam, there are foods that are allowed to be eaten and foods that are not allowed to be eaten, and especially important is how an animal is killed. So camel, cow, goat, sheep, how they're killed so that it's permissible to eat. Second issue is that in many cultures, the smell of cooking is very important and positive. So again, you walk into a restaurant and you smell the, butter and garlic, or you walk into your house and you can smell something, oh, that smells delicious. Oh, that's great. Well, in Dhofar and in most Arab countries, it is not considered a positive. When you're cooking, you shut the kitchen door, you turn on the extractor fan, and when you're done eating, you put frankincense. So often in the States, frankincense is only known as something that is used in Catholic churches. But in Dhofar, where frankincense trees grow, it's used every day, often several times a day. So the tea light is there just to show the size of those objects, which are called majmars. And on the one on the left, that has pieces of frankincense, which is just the dried sap of a tree that is cut off the tree. And you put it on a piece of charcoal, and then you have these huge plumes of perfume smoke, which refresh the house. Okay, so this is just a big table to kind of say, here's what is usual, often happens within a Dhofari context. So the first prayer of the day is just before sunrise. And usually after that, people will have tea and a small snack. People sort of eat it on the go. There's not a lot of emphasis on breakfast. It's usually something very small. The main meal is lunch. And the way Dhofar society, Omani society, and most Middle Eastern societies on the Arabian Peninsula are set up, lunch is your main meal and also your family time, because school and work often ends 1:30 to 2:30. Everybody goes home. Everybody in the house sits together. There's usually one main dish, which is rice with protein, and sometimes salad, sometimes sauce. And you often eat it on the ground with a group of people arranged in a circle around one platter, and you eat with your hands. Dinner happens much later because after lunch, everybody naps for several hours, and then sort of life starts up again around 4:30. And so dinner can be after the sunset prayer, but is usually 9, 10, 11, sometimes midnight. Sometimes at home, could be a picnic, could be a restaurant. Women and children and younger boys, older people are usually in a house, but not necessarily their house. You can sort of pick everybody up. A woman could sort of take all of her kids and go and stay at her sister's house, for example. And there's more choices of what people eat for dinner. But again, usually together and eating with your hands. Okay, So that's a lot of information. I'm going to just stop for a second. If anybody wants to type a question into the chat, we can just sort of stop and if somebody wants to ask anything. And if not, I will keep going. So I'll just stop for a second.
It always takes a little bit. So as I said earlier, we use chat today for the question, not the Q&A box.
And this is just for any quick questions. We'll have time for a longer discussion at the end, but okay, who typically prepares meals? So when you have this big house with 35 people in it, there is often one or two there's often one or two women who either do most of the cooking or supervise it. So some houses, those large houses, will have somebody who lives in. So it's somebody who is there with her own bedroom, who will stay, who might be from the Philippines, might be from India, and they will help prepare or maybe cut vegetables or something. But the main issue is that if you have like the oldest woman in the house, and then you have her 3 daughters and 4 daughter-in-laws plus 3 other women, you do not have 10 women running around those kitchens. You have a few women who that's their thing. They like cooking, or they know how to cook, or they supervise. So you can have women who have no idea how to cook anything, which is sometimes hard to explain because there's sort of this idea that the women are always in the kitchen cooking. But when you're making only 1 or 2 main dishes, you're not spending hours in the kitchen making stuff. Okay, so for Salam, the ritual cleanliness and the discussion of Islam is not something I'm going to go into because, as I said, I'm Methodist. So in general, for Sunni Muslims who I knew in Dhofar, because I do not want to speak for Islam in general, you have 5 prayers and you need to be clean before you pray. And so that whole idea of how to be clean and what that is religious information, which you can easily find online, but I'm not going to get into as I don't feel like I don't want to speak for the religion. So Brenda, the Dhofar region was not modernized at all in any way, shape, or form until the 1970s. So before 1975, there were very few roads, no schools, no clinics, very few stores. People were eating very traditionally and had very traditional kinds of agriculture. So people will talk about sort of something that was eaten in the past because their parents, the grandparents, for example, would dig up this tuber and roast it this way. But it's not the kind of, so there's a sort of family memory, but for the people who I worked with in Dhofar, Arabic was not their mother tongue. Their original language is a non-written language. So there's a whole nother layer of not having written records. So there's food that it reminds them of the grandparents and how the grandparents used to eat, but not traditional recipes like a handwritten recipe card from your grandmother. So yeah, Andrea, men usually leave the house around 8 or 9 and often have dinner with their friends, and sometimes they cook dinner together or they eat at a restaurant several nights a week. And again, hard to explain, and it's a much sort of more integrated into the culture thing of men need to be out talking to other men to get the news of what's going on. Okay, so thank you for those questions. And all right, so now we're going to start talking about food rituals. So here are some rituals that people take very seriously and which might seem new and unusual depending on your background. One is cleanliness in terms of food always means washing your hands before and after eating because you're eating with your hands. And patience and self-control, and this goes back to what I said before about not saying that you're hungry or thirsty, is that you need to wait till everybody is together. So for example, if you're on a picnic and you are waiting for somebody to show up, when you see the headlights of their car approaching where you are, then you can put down the plastic, you can get out the knives, you can get out the limes, you can get ready to eat. But you don't eat until everybody who's sharing that meal is there with you. And a second part of that patience and self-control in terms of food is that you have a round platter of food in front of you. And so you eat from the sort of pizza slice triangle shape. You don't reach across into somebody else's space. Like you just take what is in front of you. So respect for food, again, you only take from the food that's in front of you. Now, if it's something like pasta, and you're eating it on a plate with a fork, you only take from the common plate as much as you will eat. So if you are creating a plate for somebody else, if you're a host and you're making a plate for a guest, you can put a lot of food on it and like to show here, hey, look, have lots of food. But if you're taking it for yourself, you need to manage that amount. You need to not take more than you think you will eat. And because you want your plate clean when you're done. So it's in some cultures, you don't have to think about it. But in Oman, it's like you're only taking what you need. And another thing, which I've always thought was so interesting, was that you don't argue or talk about any difficult subject when you're eating. So you think of other cultures like Greece or countries like Greece or Italy or France, where the idea is you eat and you discuss and you talk and you're, maybe you raise your voice and maybe you're in Oman. No, because the idea is that you're supposed to respect the food and the food needs to go into your stomach slowly and quietly. And you should not make any kind of disruption of any kind when people are eating. So you don't bring up a difficult topic, you don't raise your voice, you don't yell at anybody, you keep very calm, and then you can have that argument later. Another thing which I find is very different than America is that you don't concentrate on the food, which was sort of funny because I wrote an entire book about food and then realized it's actually not that important because you don't praise the food in front of you. So that if I go to a friend's house and she gives me a piece of cake and I'm eating it, I'm like, wow, this is really good. This is delicious cake. She might look at me and say, oh, and the last time you came, the food wasn't good. Oh, now you think my food is good. Oh, this cake is good. But, and it's sort of like, what did I do? What did I say wrong? But like, you're given food, you eat the food, that's kind of the end of the discussion. If you spend a lot of time and energy focusing on that food, then it sort of shifts it into sarcasm almost, or that you're making fun of the food in a way that can be unsettling. And the last thing is there's a lot written about Arab hospitality and sort of force feeding people. And to me, I never found that. The idea is that you want to be one of the people, like you want to be part of the group. So if somebody gives you something to eat, you can take a bite, kind of mess it around your plate, but nobody is sort of standing over your shoulder going, eat all of that. as long as you're making a show, and I'm going to talk about this more in a minute, of eating a little bit, that's enough. And that idea goes throughout the entire culture. So fast. So as I said, in Oman, there is one understanding of fasting, one. And so you fast primarily, the main idea of fasting is through the month of Ramadan. So Ramadan is a month, and Islamic months are based on the moon. So the month, cannot be 27 different, there's not all these choices. It's 29 days or it's 30 days. So Ramadan is 29 days or 30 days. Every month is like that. And then there's many days during the year that are important in the Islamic religion that people fast, and some people fast once a week. Every fast, if you say fast in Oman, you're meaning a very specific thing. First of all, nothing goes in your mouth from sunrise to sundown. And that timing is called from a mosque, which is called the adhan, the call to prayer. So from the first call to prayer for the sunrise prayer to the adhan, the call to prayer for the sunset prayer, nothing. You don't eat anything. So you do not swallow anything to eat or drink, but no smoking. And also, and I think this point gets lost sometimes, you do not do anything to distract you from religion. So you do not listen to music, dance, gossip, be angry, behave badly, or cause or allow somebody else to behave bad. There's some social changes in that school usually ends earlier, work usually ends earlier, and then may restart late at night. So you could have, for example, a store will close at noon and then reopen at 9 o'clock at night and then be open till midnight. So like the whole social schedule shifts during the month of Ramadan. There's exemptions for pregnant women, sick people, and travelers. If you don't fast for some reason during it for a day, you make up those days before the next Ramadan. Children are encouraged to start partially fasting, but this is something that is handled specifically within the family with the father and the mother and the knowledge of the child. So it's not like there's a specific year where you need to start fasting. The parents think about the child and all the issues pertaining to the child. So you could have 4 different children in one family who began fasting at different times. And often children are sort of encouraged to, maybe if they're young, skip breakfast but have lunch, or have breakfast, skip lunch. But the issue is that once you fast every day for a complete Ramadan, you need to do that for the rest of your life. So parents will sometimes come up to children and, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and say, drink a glass of water. You're not fasting. You're not. And so it's sometimes talking to people who haven't spent a lot of time in the Middle East, they're sort of like, oh, they're forcing these kids. Well, kids often want to be grown up. And so they'll be like, I'm fasting. And the parents are like, you're too young. You're not doing it this year. You can think about it next year. And the last point is there's the forgiveness, where if you're in the kitchen and you're cooking and you're not thinking and you taste something to see if the seasoning is right, that day still counts as fasting. If you have eaten something by accident, then you don't have to redo that day. That is allowed. And there's all these sort of rules and how you look at that. And if for whatever reason, medically, you cannot fast, then you pay for food for other people. So that's the understanding of fasting. So feasts. There are basically only really 2 feasts that happen in Islam, and they are called Eid. And there's 2 different ones, one after Ramadan finishes and one after Hajj, which is the pilgrimage finish. The one after Hajj is Eid al-Adha, which is the main Eid. Both of them are celebrated the same way, where you have 3 days or 5 days of visiting. The exact day unknown goes back to this idea of Islamic months having 29 or 30 days. So you don't always, it's not like there's a 4-week period where I don't know where Eid is. Eid will be, this day or that day, basically. And you celebrate it at home. But what happens is all healthy adults must go visit all of their close neighbors. And you have a clean house, you have new snacks. Now, the thing about feast is often in America, Western cultures, a feast is like this, all of this food, and then you eat all of this food. But for these Omani feasts, these celebrations, you are often in a position where you can't eat a lot, and you certainly don't want to. So, for example, if one of the men in my research group, he might have to go to 30 to 40 different houses during Eid. So he would need to visit the houses of all his brothers and sisters, if they're not in the same house, all of his aunts and uncles, grandparents, maybe some work friends, neighbors, and other relatives. You are not eating a lot at every single one of those houses. You couldn't. So when you go to a house, you might sit for 10 minutes, you might sit for an hour or two, depending on the relationship. You have a cup of tea, maybe have one snack, and that's it. So again, if you're thinking of like Thanksgiving, or if you're thinking of Christmas, or if you're thinking of Easter, and the idea of like a bunch of people together sitting down, having this big meal, and that's your feast, it's a totally different concept, because what you're doing is focusing on the people and going to see all these different people, not the food. And for marriages for men, it's the same concept. So most companies in the government pay people once a month at the end of the month, which means marriages usually are at the end of the month. And so again, men in my research group might have 10 marriages to go to on one day. So 10 marriage parties. And that party is a groom sitting in a tent with his family members and his close friends with food. And the guest will come to the tent, shake the groom's hand, say congratulations, maybe give a gift of money, shake everybody else's hand, say hello, hang out 10-15 minutes maybe, and then leave. Because now they have to drive an hour to another town to do this for another groom. So that idea, in America of a marriage where you have like a 3-day weekend often, where you have a rehearsal dinner, and then you have breakfast, and then you have the marriage, and then you have breakfast Sunday morning, and all of this, that totally different concept. Totally different concept. Now, for a bride, she will be either in her own house, or she might be in a rented house with all of her female relatives and maybe some female relatives, the groom. And that will be a party of 3 to 5 hours, sometimes more, with decorations, sweets, dinners. So that is actually the only kind of feast where you are there for hours sitting and enjoying yourself. The other kinds of celebration are rare and not that important. So birthday parties, for kids, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't happen. When somebody graduates, maybe a woman's sisters will have a little party for her. Maybe if you have a new house, maybe not. But if somebody has been sick and is better, or returns from travel, maybe you'll have a little party at the house. Only close families, which, because the family is large, only close family could be 50 people. You'd have decorations, snacks, rice and meat, and announced, a day or two before. Everybody sits around for a few hours. But again, the emphasis is not on the food. It's that, we're happy this person is back from their travels, or we're happy this thing happened, but there's very little focus on food. So just a few photos. So this is a photo of an iftar. So iftar is the meal that you have at the end of the day, at sunset in Ramadan, to break your fast. So first of all, you have these fancy soup bowls and fancy plates, which you usually don't have for dinner. And you can see the little cups, and you see all of these covered dishes. So usually a dinner is going to be one big thing, which is the rice and the meat. And all of these covered dishes are there because people are waiting to come back from the mosque. So you hear the call to prayer. You might have a small something like a liquid yogurt. And then you go to the mosque for the prayers, and then you come home, and people take photos of this, see the little gold star, like, hey, we're ready for iftar, and send it to each other. So one of my female friends sent this to me to say, look, we're all ready for our iftar. Okay. And so on the right hand side, I'm just saying the plastic, you can see the plastic sheeting, and you can see the covered dishes and the variety of food, and the how sort of fancy it looks shows you this is not a normal meal. Like you can see in the middle, it's sort of hard to tell, but those are like fake plants that are put there for decoration, which is not something you would normally have for dinner. This I just put in because during Corona, the government would send out these notices like, for Eid, stay home. Nobody stayed home. But because there was all of that visiting during the Eids, that helped spread the virus. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a second and wait to see if anybody would like to type some questions. Anything I can clarify before I go on? Oh, thanks, Ben. Thanks for that cover. I wouldn't say ritualistic nature of food habits in Oman. I would not want to be saying that everybody in Oman is healthy. There's a lot of cigarette smoking. There is no alcohol. I mean, among the people I knew, no one drank alcohol. I mean, it's forbidden in Islam, but nobody drank alcohol. So you don't have the alcohol part of it. You do have the cigarette part. And you have people eating a lot of rice and meat. So the fried foods, again, and it's very interesting, fried foods is seen more as children and women. Children and women eat French fries and eat this really delicious dessert with fried dough. And men are sort of, we don't eat French fries. Few of the guys I knew ate French fries, but normally they're like rice and meat. But they ate so much meat and the fat of meat that I'm not trying to say that these are these like amazingly healthy people. It's just different. What they ate was different. So I don't know if that's answering your question about ritual and the they're to be blunt, there are fat people in Oman. Like people are overeating. People are definitely overeating and eating unhealthily, but it works differently than it does in Oman. And to be healthy in Oman is that you're eating meat. Like if you're able to eat meat, you're healthy. So it's like all of these like the markers are put in different places. Like what it means to be healthy in America is that, you know, your body weight is this, or your body mass index is this, or how many fruit and vegetables are you eating, or whatever. And the definition of healthy in Oman is very different. Let me see. Cooking equipment is very funny because you're cooking for a lot of people, and you you don't have like the 47,000 different little doohickeys that you see at like Williams Sonoma, for example. You have these huge cooking pots. Like you look like you could, sounds horrible. You could put a small child in. I mean, these enormous cooking pots. And sometimes people will have a gas ring attached to a canister of gas and put it on the floor because the cooking pot is so big and unwieldy. If you put it on the stove, you can't stir it. And so you put this gas ring on the floor of the kitchen, this huge cooking pot, and you have these massive, massive amounts of food because you've got 30 people in the house, plus people often make dinner and then just hand it out to the neighbors or send it over to relatives' house. So you have a lot of very big pots, a lot of serving spoons, a lot of knives, all these different knives, cutting boards, as sort of like that's your basics. And then on the other hand, you have all of these serving trays and fancy teacups and fancy coffee cups and fancy coffee thermoses, but not normal ones, like very fancy decorated ones for guests. And I'm going to go into it later, but most of the meals don't have plates or utensils unless you're doing pasta, in which case you have a small plate and a fork, or soup where you have a small bowl and a spoon. But you sort of have this odd bifurcation in the kitchen where you have these cupboards full of all of these different really gorgeous teacups and coffee cups and trays and all these like little troichkas for guests. And then you have like the workaday stuff to make the food, which is knives, cutting boards, pots. I mean, what I say about Oman is that you go to the grocery store and you get ingredients. You don't get food, you get ingredients. And you have like you buy all your vegetables and your meat and you chop it and you do everything yourself. Um, so okay, so I was in Oman when McDonald's came, and it was hysterical because for the first 2 nights there were lines out the door. It was like, we have achieved globalization, we have got our McDonald's, we are all going to eat McDonald's. And then within a week, people were like, yeah, children, kids' food, kids' food. And I mean, there is some globalization, like there's a Pizza Hut and there's a Tim Hortons. Oh my God, I miss Tim Hortons. Um, but it's changed. Okay, so the Pizza Hut, for example, um, has tables that seat 6 people as the smallest table. The table size is usually 8 to 10. So it's sort of like, oh, there's globalization, but nobody goes out to dinner with one person or 2 people. Or why would you go out to dinner by yourself unless you're just gonna like inhale something and go? So all of these restaurants, like Pizza Hut, like you go in and you're like, there are these enormous tables everywhere because if you're gonna go to Pizza Hut, you're gonna bring everybody. Um, so I would say Dhofar was fairly unchanged until the 1970s, and now globalization has come, but it's globalization with with an Omani angle on it. Um, so children, I had friends who had 14 brothers and sisters. Um, and and others would have 20 brothers and sisters because their father had several wives. And I also had friends who had 2 or 3 brothers and sisters. So it can really vary. Big families are, you know, I wouldn't say normal because that sounds like a pressure, but it's usual to have 7 or 8 children. But they're also very aware of infertility and reasons for that, and IVF and all of that. Um, Popular ingredient, salt, and there's some spice mixes. There's a big influence from India. So there's a dish that's called curry, which is not like an Indian curry. But there's countries and there's civilizations that have cuisines like Yemen. Like you can talk about Yemeni food, and Yemeni food is absolutely delicious. And then like Oman, Emirates, um, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi, they're all fighting over things like, oh, this is our national dish. Oh wait, this is our national dish. It's rice and meat and various spice blends, and literally a spice blend that will say like chicken blend or meat blend, and it's good food and a lot of but not a lot of variety and not a lot of careful seasoning the way that you would have, for example, Iran has a cuisine, Yemen has a cuisine. uh the rest of the Arabian Peninsula is sort of working with, I mean, they were in starvation mode for so long that it was just like, it's more important that we have food, not how carefully seasoned it was. Um, I mean, there were so many areas that were desert that you just, people would just drink camel milk for days, or people would just eat fish for days. Like you had very difficult food geographies for centuries. And so it's more about we've got the food than how we're seasoning it. Okay. So I think that was okay, so what we're gonna do now is I'm just gonna end with some photos so you can sort of imagine it more, and I can talk more about what the culture looks like in action. So on the left is a picnic. Okay, so we have our picnic mat is down, and then we have our piece of plastic, and then we have our round dish with the rice with the meat heaped in the middle. We've got to cut up limes, and in those little plastic white things, we have sauce and Mountain Dew, which is drink of choice. And then everybody would sit in a circle around that, and then you would eat from the section that's right in front of you. So that is very typical. I mean, I had hundreds of picnics like that. Okay, on the other side is a fancier one. Now that food came from restaurants. They're very thin tinfoil platters. And what's interesting, if you look at that, is that you have this repetition, like you've got 2 of everything, so that the men who are sitting at one end of the table, you don't need to pass anything. You don't need to, it's not like, oh, there's this special thing here, let me give it to you. There's enough of it. And notice how there's no utensils. Everybody washes their hand, and then they'll take from what is in front of them, and they'll take some rice, they'll take some of this, they'll eat the salad with their hand, and that brown rectangle thing in the middle is the dessert. And so what you would do then is you would have spoons, and everybody would just like take some of it with a spoon. So the one on the right would be a sort of fancier picnic. Oh, we went to the store and we went to a restaurant and we got these things. Okay, so these are fancier picnics, where one on the left, a friend sent that to me. So that's at her home. And she decided to make this nice breakfast. It was a weekend. So we can see how we've got the fancy tray, we have the fancy teacups. She brings out a bouquet of flowers, and then we've got boiled eggs, bread, cheese, yogurt, butter, jam, spreads. So set up for a picnic breakfast. And then on the other side, we have, this is afternoon picnic. So not a meal, but just a picnic. And again, she put into the car, right, the fancy silver tray, the pretty glass teapot, these little fancy muffins. And notice how she has the perfume. See how there's a bottle of perfume leaning up against the print, against the purse. Why? Because after you have eaten your cute muffins and drank your tea, you're going to spray yourself with the perfume so you don't have the scent of food on you. Okay, so these two photos are iftar. So iftar again is the meal that you have in Ramadan to break the fast. And you can tell instantly that they're an iftar because see all the liquids, see all the drinks, and see how everything is finger food. Again, no utensils, no plates, no forks or spoons. You've got dates, you've got cantaloupe, you have samosas, you've got watermelon, and somebody would have a big knife to cut up that watermelon with. But you've got the water, and see how you have the little bottle with the green cap, that's going to be a liquid yogurt. Because the idea is that to break your fast, you do not want to eat, this huge meal of rice and meat. You want to go slowly. So you're going to have liquids, fruit, and then maybe some small snacks. So in one of the containers on the left, I don't know if it's clear, but you have pineapple that's sliced into pieces. So the idea is that you sit in this beautiful location and you finished your prayers and now you are going to eat. And so it's the same thing on the right hand side. So that is Sultan Qaboos University. And you can see how, again, you've got all of those bottles of water. You've got the bananas, which grow everywhere in the Dhofar region, and you have the little snack foods. So, and the blue cartons on the right hand side are is the liquid yogurt, which is thought to be very helpful. So, you want a nice place to sit, and you want lots of liquids, lots of fruit to sort of get your body back into eating. And then after a snack like this at iftar, you would have a main meal with rice and meat, maybe 2 or 3 hours later. Okay, so simple party at home. So simple, I'm saying because there's no rice and meat. So this would be birthday, graduation, somebody has good news for something. So again, we have Kleenex, of course, we always have Kleenex, but we have no plates, forks, nothing. And you're taking this photo. So both of these were sent to me by female friends to say, oh, we're having a party, look, we're ready, we've got everything ready. And the idea that I talked about before with the picnic, where you have a lot of the same thing on the left-hand side, right? You've got the same plate of food 4 times. And then in the back, you've got the same thing, the same food item. So that nobody's reaching for food. Nobody's like, oh, go over there. There's this special thing over there. Those plates of food are going to be put around the room. Everybody's going to have access to the same thing. And notice how they're all fried. It's all fried food. And you take with your hands the thing that you want, and you take as much as you want and you eat it and you're done. Like this food is not the focus of the party. And on the right-hand side, you have all of these different kinds of sweets. So you have, and you can see underneath the saran wrap, those lines there are toothpicks, right? So those are toothpicks. So it's really easy just to, grab something. And then in the clear glass jar, those are wrapped chocolates. And then they have on the tier, they have sort of individual cheesecakes. And so you can see how everything's all set up for finger food. And for the table on the right, people would be sitting around that. Okay, so that is what I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing. And now we can have a more general discussion, and I'm happy to answer questions, but hopefully things are clear.
I think there's one in the chat. A question.
Oh, maybe you need to stop it and not use this. Mark, because you do not have to clean up afterwards. If you're the person responsible for washing the dishes, you are so happy that there are not 27 plates and 18 forks and spoons to clean up after. And their conception is that it's better to eat with your hands because you don't know how clean that fork, spoon, and plate are anyways. So the idea is you clean your hands, you sit down at that, round platter of food, you eat with your hands, and then you clean your hands. No fuss, no muss. The only thing you have to do is clean that platter and clean the pot that you use to cook the food, and maybe 1 or 2 knives and a spoon. Infinitely easier, let me tell you, infinitely easier than the American system.
So I see the problem with the questions, that people don't see the questions. You have to switch on under two to everyone. If you just send the questions to host and panelists, then nobody else can see them. So if you make that available, so we can reread it. So the question was, I have eaten Ethiopian and Indian food with flatbread and not utensils. Since utensils are easily obtained today, why does eating with your hands still happen so often today? So, okay. Yeah, if you ask a question, switch the blue little box on the bottom to everyone instead of to host and panelists.
And yes, sometimes some kinds of food are eaten with Lebanese bread or pita bread, as we say it. So there is some things that are eaten with bread. Mensaf, Jordanian celebration, no. Nope, I don't know what that is. And that's a good point, because even in the north of Oman, they have food traditions that are not extant in the Dhofar region. For example, in the north of Oman, they have a tradition of burying entire animals wrapped in leaves over coals for 12 hours to cook slowly and then eating that, which is not something that happens in Dhofar. So very different food traditions.
Are there any other questions? I think it was quite fascinating to see those traditions, especially feast and fast, kind of as a contrast. Oh, Okay, dann. Doesn't look like there's anything else coming. Here's something. Oh, it still goes only to hosts and panels. So if you were celebrating something in Oman, what food would you choose for your celebration?
So, like for a wedding or for Eid, for either of the two Eids, you would, in southern Oman, you would need camel meat. So, sometimes what would happen is two or three brothers would band together and buy a camel. And then, depending on their family practices, they would either slaughter and butcher the animal themselves and cook it themselves, or they would pay somebody to do that. But this sort of goes back to the non-importance of food, that you need something to give to your guests. And if so, you would need rice and meat. If you had access to fruit, then a fruit salad or something like this. In some places in the Arab world, you need coffee and dates, like coffee and dates. That's sort of like the canonical thing that you have to have on hand. But in Dhofar is not a date producing region because of the monsoon. So they often serve a kind of coconut cake called basbosa, and you get tea and basbosa. So it's not, there's not like, oh, we need this. It's like if you have something, if you have anything. And one of the things that was really fun to do with my students in Oman was to tell them how things worked in an American household when you came to visit. Because in an Omani household, if you go to visit people, you go and you sit down and they bring you what they have. Doesn't really matter what it is, but here's what we have. And they sort of bring it all out and put it all in front of you. And, here's your choice. Whereas in an American household, like you go in and you're like, do you want tea or coffee? Do you want iced coffee? Do you want iced tea? What kind of tea? I have these 6 kinds of tea. Okay, do you want sugar in the tea? Do you want milk? Do you want cream? What do you, and you, an American household can sometimes feel like you're in a restaurant with somebody saying, and you have to keep making these decisions. Whereas in Omani culture, you keep saying, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. I don't want anything. And people put stuff in front of you and then you eat. So it's opposite. If you get an Omani to an American household, you're like, what do you want? And you're like, nothing. And so you give them nothing. And then they sit there thinking you're a horrible person. And in an American going to an Omani household, they're like, what do you want? And so I tell them what I want, which is incredibly rude. What I should say is nothing. And then they put food in front of me. So it's that idea that it doesn't matter what it is. You get what you get and you're grateful for it.
Here's another question. I was surprised to see a bottle of Mountain Dew. Has food from other countries and cultures become more prevalent today?
Definitely the drinks. Definitely the drinks. I think most of the food has stayed fairly similar, at least within the past few decades. But Mountain Dew, I mean, it's like Boston runs on Dunkin's. I'm not sure what Washington, D.C. runs on. Boston runs on Dunkin's. I mean, you just need Dunkin's to get through anything. And in Southern Oman, it's Mountain Dew. Everybody drinks it.
Okay. In the United States, we are all about variety. Heaven forbid if we eat the same thing 2, 3, 4 meals in a row. Is there any perception like this with Oman food?
Nope. Nope. I had over 400 picnic dinners with the men in my research group. And there were basically 4 things that we ate. I mean, there was no need. You have food, you're grateful for the food. Say alhamdulillah, you have food. What is this like? Oh, I need something. No, alhamdulillah, there's food, halas, eat.
Are things like vegetarianism a thing in Oman?
It's funny because I've written about that in my book. There are
Oh,
some people and some of my students who decided to do that. And there's enough fruits and vegetables running around, and plus, as I said, there's a large Indian
Mm.
component. So there's a lot of Indian and Pakistani restaurants. So, and a lot of those restaurants are vegetarian. So one of my friends who is from Europe was doing anthropology work in Oman and vegetarian, and realized that the only way to go forward was, when be in front of this big platter of rice and meat, to eat some of the rice, even if maybe there was meat contaminated in the rice. To be vegetarian as an adult man trying to communicate with other men just was not going to work. And so he would eat the rice and then say, I'm vegetarian, and they accepted that. But to not eat anything would be to be placing yourself outside of that communal social group. And that would be difficult.
Oh, so what's their response to their children that first say, I don't like that particular food?
That's fine. They're kids. I mean, I've had so many meals where the kid wouldn't eat it and the mother would just sort of the Omani equivalent of DoorDash food, which is much less expensive. To get food delivered to your house is about $1 in Oman. Um, but the idea is that you indulge children for all of these things, but when the child grows up, if the child wants to be considered adult, or if like an adult, or to grow up, then they need to eat what the adults eat.
And you had mentioned earlier that some homes have cooks from other countries. Has there been any blending of foods from the introductions of these other cultures?
Yes, so there is definitely like everybody eats paratha, for example, and there's a lot of Indian food or Indian dishes that are used. And yes, sometimes the cooks will make food that is more of their own culture, and that's sort of adapted and absorbed into that. Because as long as if it's a rice dish with spices, or if it's a lentil dish, then it sort of all fits in.
Does McDonald's adapt its menu in Oman besides presumably using halal meat?
Yes, it is very careful on the halal meat, and there's signs in English and Arabic, and like Pizza Hut has pepperoni, and then a big sign that says our pepperoni is from Turkey, like
Hmm.
Turkey gobble gobble, not the country. Um, so yes, all the global brands that come in, like there's Carrefour stores, for example, from France. And what happens, and I talk about this with my students, is that like KFC, for example, has mojitos. And the mojito is Sprite with fresh lime and mint. And so I have to explain to my students, like, if you go to a European country and get a mojito, it will have alcohol in it. And they're like, why? Why would you put alcohol in a mojito? And it's like, okay, reverse that. It's the mojito started with the alcohol. And it's the same thing with bacon, because they have, bacon all over the place. Well, it's turkey bacon. So it's like you have to have these conversations with people like, okay, this thing that you're eating here, Baba Aram, the dessert, is all over the place on dessert menus. And you have to explain, do not order this when you go to Europe. So it works both ways.
Yeah, we talked about McDonald's in earlier presentations, how
Mm,
they adapt often kind of to local traditions, like especially.
yes, it does that very well.
Yeah.
Like McDonald's and KFC both have rice and chicken meals.
Mhm. Mhm. Did you also adapt during the fast to the times? Are they closed during the day or?
Um, I did not, and Oman is very different from other places in that they really have, honestly, a live and let live policy. And so I would just close my office door. I would eat and drink whatever I wanted. I didn't wear perfume, makeup. I wore more clothing. Um, but when somebody would knock on my door, I would just cover my coffee cup with a Kleenex or something. So some places are very strict about never eating or drinking in public and all of this. And Oman was very, very accommodating. And what they do is like at a hotel, they will just have a room that becomes the restaurant during the day. So if you're there, you just go in that room or you get room service.
Hmm.
So the restaurants are closed, but you can still get food.
Right. Okay. I mean, how big was the city where you lived? Kind of.
Um, I think the region is 200,000. I can't remember
Mhm.
off the top of my head. So not large.
Okay.
Um, but the largest in that whole, I mean,
Hmm.
it was an hour and a half plane ride to the next city.
All right. All right. All right. Okay. Okay. Good. Any more questions? Last call. Well, then thank you very much, Professor Risse.
Thank
It
you.
was very enlightening, very interesting to hear from you
Thank
and
you.
that perspective that kind of adds another color on our rainbow of different experiences with food. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you
for
very much.
everyone else, we will see each other on Thursday, when Kashef Majid from our business department here will talk about food waste. Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Have a good
Goodbye.
afternoon. And the
Good
students,
afternoon.
we will see each other in 5 minutes in the other room. Okay.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you.